Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. And earlier this week on the podcast that I do every week, by the way, did you know I do a podcast? Boom. There are 119 for you to catch up on. But it's a 30-minute podcast where I talk about a different topic every week and also spend the majority of the time answering your questions. Lots of good stuff over there if you are the podcast type. But there was a question on there about somebody was asking, why would I master my song in a separate session when I could just as easily put plugins on my master fader, such as right over here, and do the mastering within my mix session. Now, one answer that you'll hear, and it's valid, is that it's nice to compartmentalize what you're doing. So you get all your recording done before you start mixing. That makes sense. And then you get all your mixing done before you start mastering. And if you have, the argument could be made, if I'm doing all my mastering right here, so I'm putting on an EQ and I'm putting on a limiter and all those things, and I'm doing all this inside the actual mix session on my master fader, there's a problem in that I might want to go back and make changes. So I think, oh, if the vocal was a little louder there, let me go make that change. And for me, it's really tempting. But that's actually not the reason why I don't think you should do it. I think the reason is much bigger. And here it is. Let me show it to you. So here's a song from an album or an EP I mixed for a client. And just recently he wanted me to come back in and mix down everything minus vocals, so they could have just instrumental versions for placements in movies and stuff like that. So here's what that sounds like. Okay, so it's mixed, it's ready to go, and I could say from this point, I think it was a 4-song EP, and I could say, you know what, I'm just going to master right here because I don't see any reason to go into another session to export a stereo file and import that elsewhere. I'm just going to do all my limiting, EQ, multiband compression, whatever I'm going to do during mastering. I'm going to slap it right here on the master fader and save everyone time. Well, that's all well and good if this was a single. And this was the only song I'm working on. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but in reality, this is a part of an album, or an EP at least, of 4 other songs. So if I were to master each of them in their own mix session like this, then there's really no way for me to try to get some consistency between each of the songs. In terms of sheer volume, are they roughly the same volume from one song to the next? Tonally, does one have a lot more bass than the others? Those types of things happen when you mix an album. Even though it will be fairly consistent because it's you mixing, chances are there are going to be things about one mix that are different from the other, and you can compensate for those during mastering with simple things like EQ, compression, maybe multiband compression, to smooth out the differences so you have one cohesive collection of songs. So if I was to do all that in the mix session here, then my only way of making changes would be to export all the files, put them in a playlist in iTunes, put that on my iPod, go listen in the car or wherever I want to listen, and then make note of the differences between the songs, and then come back and try to open up each song individually and make those changes and hope and pray that it actually turns out okay. That's not a great way to work, and I would argue it's a waste of time. So the way that I think you should do it, and the way that a lot of people, especially the professionals I talk to, master sessions is like this. Now, you don't need Studio One's mastering suite to pull this off. But what the point is, you could do all this inside of another. If you're in Pro Tools, you could just open up a Pro Tools session and put each song on its own track and spread them out so they're each playing at separate points in time. You could do the same thing. But the benefit here is I can listen to that song we were just listening to. I can listen to the mastered version here. And I can say, okay, that sounds good. How does that relate to this one over here? Okay, that one's acoustic. How about this one? You see what I can do? I can very, very quickly jump between each of the songs in real time. I can listen to them, which is obviously the big point of this, but I can look at it on the Spectrum Analyzer and see if there are certain frequencies that really are jumping out when I switch between songs. I can look at the level meter and see how they're comparing to each other level-wise. If one jumps out and looks obviously louder than the others and it's not appropriate for that style of song or whatever, I can see all that and I can make those adjustments. I can say, this one has a lot of big bass. I'd like for this one to have a little more low end. Maybe I want this one to be a little bit fuller in the bottom end to match this other one, so I could come in here and do a little bit of a boost, maybe around 100 hertz, or maybe a little bit lower. And I think, okay, that might match the fullness better. Let's go back over here. And I may say something like, those guitars in the upper mid-range are a little bit loud. I can turn those down and balance things. Anyway, I can do it between. This isn't really a mastering lesson as much as it is a workflow lesson. I can quickly go between the songs and make adjustments. So now I'm completely in mastering mode. I'm referring to each song as a whole and making them work together as an album. Whereas during mixing, I'm using individual tracks and making them work together as a mix. It's kind of like a pyramid. We're working our way up, and this is kind of the final step. So these are the reasons why I think you should master in your own dedicated session, as opposed to doing your mastering on the master fader of the mix session. It gives you more control. It'll actually save you a lot of time, and in the end, it'll make everything work out and sound better. And to me, those are good enough reasons to start doing it. So if you haven't done that before, I'd encourage you to try it out. And if you have, kudos to you. Here's just more, hopefully more reinforcement that you are doing things in a way that I at least think makes a lot of sense. Thanks again for watching this video and being a subscriber. If you haven't checked out the daily newsletter over at Home Studio Corner, check it out. You get a free ebook or whatever the freebie happens to be on the given day that you sign up. Sends you a daily email with lots of great information like what you've heard today. So thanks again. See ya.